now we're going to get into some techniques of how to refine masks. We've learned about creating masks using brushes and creating masks using luminosity and color selections and ranges and things like that. So what I'm going to do is work on the brush mask. So this will be a brush mask technique primarily, but you can utilize the underlying concept on any type of mask, whether it's a brush mask or whether it's a range selection mask, things like that. So what I'm going to do is click on my layer mask thumbnail, and I'm going to, it's got a feather applied to this. I'm going to pull this all the way to the left to work with the actual mask, not that secondary feather that's been added. So I'm going to Alt or Option click on the mask, and I can go in and I can refine this mask. I can brush on it. I can say, well, I really want to brush on it with black. Let's increase the size of my brush, and you can see I can make changes to this mask. However, those changes are fairly meaningless until I get to where I can view what is happening on the mask. Okay, so now I don't like this technique because when you're brushing on something subtle like this particular warming filter, the only way to really do it is to turn it way up so you can see what is happening and see where you're brushing, and then you can turn it down. You can do that. I like to visualize it as a kind of like as a finished object. So I want to see where that mask is applied. So I have a couple techniques that I've utilized for that. So let's go into layer, create new fill layer, new solid color fill layer. And the switch that does all the magic is this previous layer to create clipping mask layer. Okay, so let's click on that, and you'll see that my foreground color is orange. So by default, it selects foreground color and utilizes the orange. You can make it any color you want, something that stands out against your image. The orange works for me, so I'll say okay to that. By default, it creates a layer mask associated with that solid fill layer. I'm gonna just throw that away so we don't confuse ourselves. I'm gonna click on the brush layer mask. Now, working on this layer mask, I'm gonna increase the size of my brush, and you can see I've got black and white. I've got my brush selected. I can go in here, I can brush off, say, well, I really want to brush off that mask, and you can see everywhere I brush turns black on my layer mask, but I want to start to apply some more white, so I'll flip that color. You can use X on the keyboard or that angled arrow, and I'm gonna add some more of this effect to the sky. So let's pull it to the right of the sky just a little bit. And again, the stronger your feather is, the more organic it's going to look, the more natural it's going to look. So I'll just click a couple times in there. Then I want to start to apply some of this information to these beaches. So let's pull in to here. Whoops, too far zoomed in. And I need to reduce the size of my brush, so I'm going to severely crush this brush down. So let's go something like that. Looks good to me. And we'll brush in, say I want this effect, this warming effect on this beach here. Okay. And then maybe a little tiny bit in that bright area. Let's pull this over and put it on this beach. I'm going to do some bright area. Got beach area here that I want to brush it onto. And then as I get to over here, my brush is too big, so all I have to do is reduce my brush size and then brush onto this beach area. Okay, so you can see, and then again put it on some of the bright spots of these cliffs, and I can be as accurate as I want to, or as accurate as I feel I need to get this effect. This is obviously a fairly subtle effect, so I don't have to be too accurate. But in here, I can pick and choose where and refine the mask as much as I want to, or as little as I want to. So again, let's apply some of these in the bright areas up here. We'll just create a little daub there, And you can click or drag, and I'm doing a mixture of these to get the mask that I want. Now let's shut the orange color fill layer off. And what you can see is if I shut this off and turn it on, I'm not sure how well that's going to come across on the video. Let's increase the intensity of that color. Shut it off and turn it on. And you can see I got a nice color cast on here, and then a nice color cast on the beach. It's obviously too strong, but for the sake of the video, you should be able to see it. And I've done that in the context of the image with this color fill layer. This is my preferred method, but there is another technique that we can use where you select the actual adjustment layer, and I double click on that layer off to the right hand side and add something called this color overlay layer style. And you can see it looks exactly the same because fundamentally it is exactly the same. I've got my orange color, my normal blend mode 100, we'll say okay to that, and I can select my layer mask and go in, same white selected, and choose how I want to brush these on. So let's brush it on to some of the bright spots on the cliffs here. We'll add a little bit more in this area, and then pan over to that other beach at the edge of this. So we'll go and lay down some color in here. Okay, again, you can be as accurate or as blobbish as you want. I'm using a fairly small brush, but you don't have to. Again, because this is a fairly subtle effect, it doesn't really matter, or it matters less, I will say, the type of selection that you've got. So in this area, I'm going to just increase the intensity. You can see there's already some orange on here, but I'm going to increase the intensity by increasing the density of that mask. So that's done. I'm going to press Command or Control 0. I've got the effect where I want it. Now, what I want to do is see where that is going. So let's shut off that effect. This effect's eyeball that I clicked on is really kind of the bucket. The folder for the effects underneath. Since there's only one, I can just click this off and it shuts off. I can do the eyeball next to the color overlay. It does the exact same thing. So it doesn't really matter which one you use. And you can see I've got a nice color effect. Let's turn this off and turn it back on. I've got a nice color cast on these beaches and on some of the rocks and from the top left of the image. So why did I say that color fill layer was my preferred method? Because with this color overlay, it takes on the levels and all of the adjustments associated with the layer that you're working on, the adjustment layer that you're working on. So if for some reason I go in and I change the opacity, you can see it changes the opacity of my colors. And if you're working really low opacities, it sometimes can be hard to see where that mask is applied. Using the color fill layer, that doesn't happen. So it's just a matter of preference and what you work in. And you could say, well, I want to turn it all the way up to 100 and brush on, and then I'll adjust and play with my opacities and things like that. You can do that. You can do that as well. So it's really personal preference as to what you utilize. So the only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the feather on this mask. So clicking on that layer mask thumbnail, I'm going to pull this and let's turn this on so we can see what's happening. So if I pull this mask to the right, or this feather to the right, you can see the adjustment live on the mask on the screen. So you can say, well, it's getting, let's pull it way to the right. It's getting way too thin. So it's decreasing the density by virtue of the fact that it's feathering. So let's pull this until we get a nice nice fill effect. So that looks good to me. Well, let's shut this color overlay off and see what it looks like. Yeah, it looks nice. So there's a mask refinement technique that I use. Again, you can use the same color fill clip layer or this color overlay on the color selection range masks, luminosity ranges, things like that. You can use on any mask type. This is just an example of how to use it on a brush mask.